Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this one is going down the Scientific Editor series. And I'm very happy to have Planetary Science Journal editor Brian Jackson with us today. Hey, Brian.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing very well today on this September 27th of 2021. We are past the equinox. And so the temperatures in Phoenix, Arizona, where I live, have finally, in some sense, broken. We're down into the lower 90s and 80s. So glad to have a little reprieve from the heat. And where are you located at?
I live up in beautiful Boise, Idaho.
Excellent. That must be the origin of that fancy looking bee behind you there.
Yeah, so this is the on the campus here at Boise State University in downtown Boise.
Cool. It looks like it's moving. You know, it's got.
Right. Yeah, so as I was saying, my daughter calls this the fast bee because it looks like it's taken off to the right.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And how old's your daughter, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, she's 8.
8. Very cool. That's a good age for coming up with things like fast bees. Very cool. Very cool. Looks like Boise has some hot air balloons, at least in that picture. Have you ever taken a ride in one of those?
Yeah, I have not taken a ride in one of these, but every fall, right at the beginning of September, there's something called the Spirit of Boise Hot Air Balloon Festival.
Oh, cool.
So that weekend, it's right around Labor Day weekend. They have a big event where they launch balloons over the city first thing in the morning, and so for me, that's when I know fall has started. Is I'll be biking into my office and I can see the hot air balloons rising into the air over the city, and then I know it's not officially fall, but it's getting there.
Yeah, it's a pre-equinox event. Very cool. Well, one day maybe you'll ride in one of those. Those look pretty awesome. Looks like a beautiful day in Boise when they took off.
Oh, I mean, the fall is just a fantastic time in Boise. The weather's just fantastic.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So Brian, what do you like to do for research?
So my research group does 2 different kinds of research. We do primarily exoplanet research, which involves trying to find planets outside of the solar system, characterizing those planets in various ways, looking at their orbits, their atmospheres, those kinds of things. But we also do planetary science field research with relevance to the Martian atmosphere.
Ooh,
so
cool.
we study terrestrial dust devils,
cool.
which dump dust into the Earth's atmosphere. On Mars, dust devils are a huge contributor to the dusty atmosphere there. And so we try to understand how dust devils work here on the Earth to understand how they would work on Mars.
Very cool. And is that primarily observational? So you're picking up like NASA satellites, or is that more of a theoretical modeling of how dust devils do their thing?
Actually, it's primarily field work. So we actually put instruments out in the field at a field site not too far from Boise to try to study active dust devils as they pass near our instruments. Okay. We'll put instruments on drones and actually fly the drones through the dust devil to try to probe the interior structures.
Ooh, who's the pilot on those?
That's me, actually. Yeah. So I have a drone pilot license so that I can do that.
You must be pretty good at that to keep it in the dust devil.
Actually, it's not. The drone is very stable. You don't have to do much except kind of point it in the right direction. I'm not a very accomplished drone pilot, but the drones nowadays are so sophisticated. You don't have to know how to fly them very well.
Awesome. And how big is the drone? How heavy is this thing?
We just have a what's called a DJI Mavic 2. So it's okay. It's not a big drone. So dust devils are not really that windy. They look a lot more impressive than they are if you're just actually standing in one. They're not usually windy enough to knock you over or even blow the drone around very much. And that's kind of one of the mysteries of dust devils is they can lift dust a lot more easily than we expect that they should be able to.
What kind of instruments do you put on the drone?
So we put a pressure sensor. We actually have a dust sensor that we've mounted on the drone to probe the structures and count up the dust. Yeah, those kinds of things.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm always kind of curious how people get into the fields they do, because there's 10,000 fields one could do in astronomy. So how did you get into this field of research?
Well, so my background is actually in atmospheric physics. All of my coursework as a grad student was focused on atmospheres. But I sort of took a little bit of a detour for my thesis and did orbital dynamics of extrasolar planets. So we did my thesis was looking at orbital evolution of short period exoplanets.
Okay.
So I did that, and then as a postdoc did some follow-on work to some of that, thinking about what happens to short period planets as they spiral into their host stars. How do they undergo disruption? And then as I moved here to Boise State, it made a lot more sense to expand the geoscience type research that I had been working on for a while as kind of a side project. That's becoming more and more of a main project, actually, trying to understand the influence of dust on atmospheres.
Cool.
And so I would say it's almost 50-50 now. My exoplanet research almost splits 50-50 with my solar system research.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. So in that illustrious trajectory, what was your very first AAS Journals article?
Yeah, I had to go look this up. I had a pretty good guess as to what it was, but I wanted to make sure. So my very first article with the AAS Journals was a paper on the tidal evolution of short period exoplanets from 2008. And I just went back to look, and it currently has 250 citations on it. So that was a pretty well-timed paper. We ended up getting a lot of interest in the work.
Yeah.
And then so that motivated a lot of other kind of follow-on research for my thesis. And then it has motivated a lot of the work that I've done as a postdoc and then as a faculty member, thinking about these short period exoplanets and what they tell us about evolution of planetary systems and those kinds of things.
Cool, cool. So then from 2008, let's slide forward a little bit chronologically. And then the Planetary Science Journal started, and it's, maybe a year or 2 years old or so. So what made you decide to become a scientific editor for the PSJ?
Well, I should say I didn't make the decision to be an editor. I just applied. Other much smarter people.
Okay.
Made the decision to make me an editor. But yeah, I would say that the thing that really motivated me to want to do it was a desire to serve the community and to expand accessibility to science. As you know, there have been historical kind of inequities in the science field, and the Planetary Sciences Journal had this really interesting focus on trying to improve equity in the publication process. So one of the things we do, for example, is we have these double-blind anonymous reviews where the referees don't know who the authors are. All that information is redacted, and then the authors don't know who the referees are. And that has actually, I think, helped to improve representation, particularly among women authors, but more generally, it's helped to mitigate a lot of these unconscious biases that can sometimes make the refereeing process, publication process, not be as fair to folks who are not as represented in the field. Sure. So I've been really happy and been very proud to be part of that effort.
Cool. Very nice. Very nice. Hint to authors, if you want double anonymous, don't be posting your article on archive as soon as you submit it. So yeah, keep it double anonymous if one wants. So let me just ask, because people may not necessarily know, what does a scientific editor generally do? I mean, what's sort of your daily or weekly, however one wants to work it? What does a scientific editor do?
The short answer is I send a lot of emails.
Yeah.
But yeah, what we do as editors is we shepherd a manuscript through the publication process. And so what that involves is receiving a paper that people want to get published, reviewing the paper for sort of, quality checks, looking for referees, other scientists to read the paper very carefully and provide feedback, processing that feedback to make sure that it's all kind of on topic and useful feedback, send that to the authors. And then that process sort of iterates where we collect feedback from the referees, send it to the authors, get a revised manuscript, send the revised manuscript back to the reviewers.
Cool.
Usually that process is very smooth and professional. Occasionally we do get some drama And so that's, I think, when the editing process can be a little more complicated, is to kind of maneuver that around that drama. But I would say that I have mostly been very impressed. Almost 99% of the time, we come up with a very smooth
Yep.
publication process, and I think the authors are pretty happy with it.
Cool, cool. Roughly how many new submissions do you get coming in per week? Is that 1 a week, 5 a week, 10 a week?
So I serve both in the Planetary Science Journal as an editor, but also for the Astrophysical Journal, and
Okay.
those journals as well. So for Planetary Science Journal, yeah, it's probably 1-ish a week. It's probably not much more than that. But in a typical week with Planetary Science Journal and the Astrophysical Journal, all those journals that I help to edit, I probably am touching 30 to 40 manuscripts a week. So touching them means reviewing new submissions, looking at referee reports, sending responses to authors. So maybe I'll see 5 to 10 new submissions in a week for all those journals together.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Very nice. And the other, well, at the time, totally novel thing when the PSJ started was that it was a gold open access, right? It was completely open, transparent. And of course, the big news as of not too long ago is all of the AAS journal portfolios will become open access, which I think is pretty cool. It's very nice. So you mentioned that so as those new articles come in, you give it a read. You give it a read before you begin the adventure of seeking referees. We'll get into that. And so, what do you think makes for a good, solid initial submission to either PSJ or APJ or AJ or something like that?
Gosh, it's really hard to come up with like a one good answer for that. But usually, papers that are sort of impactful, they are, of course, they have to be interesting. What makes something interesting is hard to say, but I want it to be interesting. I would say good papers are also written at a level that someone with not a lot of background can understand them.
Okay.
I try when I write my papers to write them on the assumption that my undergraduate students are going to have to read it, because I usually make them.
Okay.
So I try to write it in a way that someone who's maybe like a sophomore or a junior in college can at least get the gist of what the paper is about and not get too lost in the jargon or the technical aspects of things. If there's some very sticky technical point in a paper, I will usually make an effort to explain that clearly. And so I find that those kinds of papers appeal to me, that they really try to be very clear and explicit about what they've done and not assume that the reader just knows all this other material.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So you hit multiple audiences, so to speak, with that initial submission. So then you go through the process and you pick some referees, and then there's a first iterations. And so what guidance or tips do you have for authors about the peer review process? Any words of wisdom to authors about that process?
Oh my gosh. I would say just stay in touch with your editor. That's probably the number one thing that you can do that's easy. Is it is not at all unusual to need to extend a deadline, and in the vast majority of cases, it's very easy for us to extend a deadline. There's usually these deadlines are pretty soft. The absolute worst thing an author could do is to just not respond to requests for updates. So I want to reassure authors, don't feel bad about asking for an extension on a deadline. That's what I'm here for. So please just stay in touch. That's the best thing you can do.
Yeah. How about let's go down that a little bit. So on the author side, how about and you've been an author yourself, so that leverages into the experience, and still are an author. I didn't mean to have it all past tense. But what guidance do you have for handling a referee report that comes in? So you've put blood, sweat, and tears into an article, and you submit it, and a referee report comes back. And what's a good way for authors to handle a referee report that might be critical at certain points?
Yeah, a good referee report is going to have some things that are a little sticky, things that maybe you didn't anticipate. So you want some good feedback there. I would say if you get a negative referee report as an author, probably the first thing to do is just take a breath,
Yeah.
back away from it for a second, because it's very easy to react emotionally, and I'm guilty of this myself. Um,
Mhm.
and then when you go back to respond to it, do your best to respond to each point, kind of one at a time. Be clear about what changes you've made to the manuscript to address each comment. And then when you write your response letter, it's very helpful for me as an editor to see kind of a bulleted list. Here's what the reviewer said. Here's what changes we made to address that. If as an author you feel that a particular point from the referee is not valid for whatever reason, you are well within your rights to argue back against it and say that I don't think we should make any changes. This is an incorrect point for whatever reason. But it's very helpful for me as an editor to understand that. So please explain your reasoning for pushing back. Because
Mhm.
as the editor, I'm going to have to make that call whether that's a justified response or not, and I need to know why you think that.
Mhm.
Um, if you get a negative referee report which has a lot of like antagonistic or just unhelpful negative language, please flag that to me as the editor. Please tell me that you got what you consider to be an unprofessional referee report, and I want very much to address that.
Right.
The vast majority of reports we get are professional and diplomatic, but we do occasionally get these unprofessional reports, and I want to address those as an editor as best I can. So yeah, authors should have no hesitation to flag those for us, and we will do what we can to address them.
Right. And I will add that it's not like the scientific editors don't read those reports when they come in. We absolutely do. Um, uh, and so usually when it happens, if something's, obviously antagonistic or, they're reviewing the person and not the science, usually we catch those before it goes out and there's remediation at that point. But on occasion, we're human. On occasion, things slip through, and so authors may get something that they consider, antagonistic or unprofessional. And if that's the case, I take Brian's advice. Yeah, absolutely. Go back to the scientific editor and say, "Hey, I think this thing's out of bounds, or skirting an edge it shouldn't." So yeah, communicate with your scientific editor is always a good thing. Let's go on the other side of that. Thing, because it is a dynamic between authors and referees. So what guidance or tips do you have for referees on how to be a good referee? Because nobody's born knowing the stuff. We don't take classes in how to be a good referee, how to write a referee report. So what tips do you have for people who should be honored to be asked to be a referee, how to write a good quality referee report?
Yeah, well, I want to start by thanking referees, because gosh, what you do is a very tough job. There's not a lot of thanks other than just us thanking you that you get for that work. So yeah, it's just a non-trivial task. So we really appreciate it. Yeah, so the kinds of referee reports that I think are the most helpful are ones that, as you said, really stay focused on the science. It's very helpful to be specific about your concerns. So sometimes you'll see comments that are like, I didn't like this, or if you said, well, this didn't really make sense to me, or I didn't really like the way that they wrote that. That kind of comment is not helpful because it doesn't give the author anything to do. So if you have some concern about a specific aspect of a study, be explicit about why you don't like that. It's helpful if you can cite references so that the author can then go back and look at those references to decide whether they're applicable. But yeah, give operational feedback. What could the author do to address this point, rather than just say, I didn't like this, or I this has a big problem or something like that. Be specific about why and what they can do to fix it.
Right, because the goal of the peer review process, at least as practiced by the community in the AAS journal portfolio, is to improve a paper and bring it to publication, right? And that's reflected in of order 85% or so of papers that come in are accepted for publication, which is unlike some other journals where the primary point is to weed out articles. So these are your colleagues, right? These are your colleagues who are reviewing your papers, and hopefully vice versa, authors are also reviewing papers. And so in general, it's a positive process, should be viewed as a positive process to improve a paper and bring it to manuscript. Yeah, and if you're worried, concerned about more, curious about what those other 15% is, curiously, 5% is roughly on first iteration, authors never come back. They're just abandoned, so they get checked off. Then there's the 5% or so of submissions that come in that are just not suitable for publication in any journal. So those get knocked out. And then, a few percent, yes, that's where the scientific editor has to make the hard decision, and they are rejected for one reason or another. And so that's sort of the sum. But overall, it should be viewed as a positive process by both referees and editors. Yeah, well, thank you. Do you have any other tips for shout outs for the peer review process in toto?
I would point to the notes to the editor as a good way of communicating information to editors that you don't want passed either back to your referees or to the authors. Mm-hmm. I suspect that a lot of folks who interact with the journals don't realize that is a completely viable means of communication with the editor. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot more helpful, frankly, if you put notes in that than if you send me a really long email.
Yes.
Separate from the whole publication process. Because once you're outside the system, it's very hard to kind of like keep track of what happened. It can be hard to keep the process on track. And so, yeah, my advice would be to, as much as possible, put notes in the notes to the editor. You can always send me an email and say, by the way, I put some notes in the notes to the editor. Please have a look at those, and I'll certainly look at them. But yeah, as much as possible, try to stay in the system on the website through the go through the process, because yeah, once you try to interrupt the process in some way, it makes things much harder.
Makes it harder. Yeah. Yeah, just I'll just do a shout out to the managing staff who do miracles. Couldn't do this without them. So this is Janice Sexton and Alex. Really do a fantastic job on moving the articles through the system.
Yeah, every time I send an email to Janice, I think, oh, she's too busy. I'm not going to hear back from her. And like 20 minutes later, she'll send me this huge long, and I'm like, how does she have the time to respond so quickly to so many different requests? I have no idea. So the staff at the journal are just amazing.
Yeah. And other things that we do, part of the peer review process, which are value adds to the process at all, right? We have data editors, Gus and Greg, who will often put useful comments about the data or the software that is used, some aspect of that. And so these are value adds to your Gold Open Access article. Yep, for sure. Okay, cool. Brian, I want to thank you so much for chatting about your scientific editor responsibilities and your science and all of that. It was very nice. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure.
All right, everyone, that will do it on this one. And I hope this makes your astronomy day just a little bit better. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.